Hello, everybody, and a very warm welcome to LMT YouTube channel.
Like wife, like husband. At the 2024 DealBook Summit in New York City, Prince Harry took center stage alongside a distinguished lineup, including Serena Williams, Sundar Pichai, Sam Altman, and former U.S. President Bill Clinton. Introduced as the co-founder of the Archwell Foundation and Chief Impact Officer of BetterUp, Harry's presence underscored his growing influence in discussions about mental health, social media's impact, and values-driven leadership. Hosted by Andrew Ross Sorkin, the summit featured diverse conversations on the intersections of business, politics, and culture. During his segment, Harry addressed persistent media speculation about his marriage to Meghan Markle, with humor, joking,
because apparently we've bought or moved house maybe 10, 12 times. We've apparently divorced maybe 10, 12 times as well. So everyone's just like, what? So yeah, it's hard to keep up with, but that's why you just sort of ignore it. The people I feel most sorry about are the trolls who their hopes are just built and built and built, and it's like yes, and then it doesn't happen.
Prince Harry's playful jabs at the tabloids during the DealBook Summit were pure gold. His humor perfectly highlights the absurdity of ongoing rumors. One day, it's Harry and Meghan are moving again. The next, it's they're divorcing, and now, apparently, they're buying a home in Portugal. The narrative keeps shifting, but the receipts say otherwise. If this is what a troubled marriage looks like, the trolls really need to reevaluate their storyline. His candid remark highlighted the absurdity of tabloid narratives while drawing laughter from the audience. Harry also reflected on the deeper challenges of living under intense media scrutiny, particularly in the aftermath of his mother, Princess Diana's death. He shared how therapy has helped him regain control and prioritize his mental well-being, a lesson he now advocates for through BetterUp. He emphasized the dangers of social media, especially for children, and discussed Archewell's initiatives to create safer online environments. Looking ahead, Harry spoke about his legacy, expressing his desire to be remembered as a principled man, a loving husband, and a dedicated father. He underscored the importance of staying true to his values in a world often defined by relentless criticism and misinformation. Join Prince Harry in a candid podcast-style conversation with Andrew Ross Sorkin at the DealBook Summit 2024, as they delve into media scrutiny, mental health, the impact of social media, and his reflections on values, family, and legacy. An unfiltered look into his journey beyond the headlines.
Good afternoon. I wanted to have Prince Harry here today because we've all been inundated. We've been talking about it actually all day in many ways about the media, about information and misinformation, disinformation, the role of social media in all of this, and how it really ties in to our mental health. And the truth is that the gentleman to my left, the Prince, has more personal experience this than just about anybody I know. And he grew up in the spotlight as a child. His nearly every moment has been captured by photographers and journalists who have written about him endlessly, often with stories that have strayed far from the truth. And he's been harassed in person and online, and it's taken a toll. It's also led him to examine these issues in a way that I think many people have not. And he's about to make headlines all over again because next month he's got a major lawsuit that he's brought that's going to trial in the UK against Rupert Murdoch's tabloids that focuses on the phone hacking scandal that began more than a decade ago. And so we're going to talk about that and so much more. Prince Harry, I want to thank you.
Thanks for the intro.
For being here. You didn't need an intro, really.
Well, it's all the things that you just described. I now find myself sitting here under the spotlight in front of all these incredible people. So it's sort of going back over the same things. By the way, it's a very nice carpeted stage.
Thank you. Let me ask you this, though, and maybe you could start at the beginning for us, because I think many of us have had these battles with the media and social media and just all of this. But take me back, if you could, if you'd go there to your childhood. because I think that was a really formative experience in terms of how that really led you to connect all of the dots in terms of how you think today about these issues.
Look, as you touched on there, I've had a lived experience since I was a kid. I've seen stories written about myself that aren't exactly based on reality. I've seen stories written about members of my family, friends, strangers, all sorts of people. And well, I think when you grow up within that environment, you do find yourself questioning the sort of the validity of the information, but also what other people are thinking of that as well, and how dangerous it can be over the course of time. But I do really find myself, even more so now, wondering how or why people trust the information that they're given, how they trust it, and where they're getting it from, and how any form of accountability can actually happen. Right. And I'm talking about mainstream media, social media. It's a very broad scope. But as a kid, social media didn't exist.
I was rereading Spare, and you said the war for me, with I think the media, unknowingly began in August of 1997. And you said I was fighting myself. What do you mean by that?
I think again, when you're kind of trapped within this bubble, where it kind of feels like there's no way out, and what happened to my mum, and the fact that I was a kid and I felt helpless, there becomes the inner turmoil, the inner battle of, especially at a young age, there was clearly nothing that I could do. I felt helpless. One of my biggest weaknesses is feeling helpless. I don't know, maybe people couldn't relate in the room. And it was something that I knew that I couldn't fix, and it was also a situation that I knew I couldn't get out of. And the thing that worried me the most was, what's happened to her, is that going to happen to me, or is that going to happen to my wife, or is that going to happen to my kids?
And the helplessness was it about reading about it, and about reading people saying things that just weren't true?
Well, I think certainly throughout my life, there have been moments when I have read a lot, and there have been moments when I've read nothing. And I highly recommend the latter. Because once you stop reading the stuff about yourself, you've automatically removed the power from their hands. Because with that level of fear comes an element of control. And one of the reasons why I probably didn't, remove myself from the situation sooner was because of that very fear. Right. That fear of, well, they control the narrative, so whatever I do, whatever I say, they can choose their version of reality to be able to effectively control me and keep me in that space.
You've talked a lot about going to therapy. Has that helped you?
It's helped me massively. I highly encourage it.
How so?
For me, it burst a few bubbles for me. I think, again, being brought up within an institution, because I think a lot of people may think that I fit in a certain box. I actually don't. I kind of straddle many different worlds. I wear different hats, and I'm involved in so many different organizations, charitable business, and such like. But and again, on these subjects that you're bringing up, not therapy specifically, but I'm certainly by no means an expert. However, I do have a lot of experience, right, as you said, from childhood growing up. Therapy was really the thing for me that, again, bearing in mind the circumstances, being brought up in an institution, I hunted, I was 10 years in the military. There's a very clear side of the road that one might say that he's clearly on that. And then obviously, as we know, my life changed a lot. So I am sort of, straddling two very, very different sides in this case. But no, therapy for me was a blessing, because it was really what I would describe as cleaning the windshield.
But what was the lesson for you about dealing with both this idea of your own life that you knew, that was factual, mm-hmm, and this other life which you would read about?
One might say, I could never say I'd made peace with it. It's just starting to feel a little bit like therapy, actually. and now group therapy. But I think I think in my situation, one would hope to be able to make peace with it. And then to a certain degree, I made peace with some of the past. But what it really did was open my eyes and open my perspective on how to be able to resolve the inner war, the inner turmoil for myself. And a large part of that, and I think I've spoken about this before, was I was always convinced that I needed to be angry or frustrated towards the press because of what they did to my mum. And through therapy and a few other bits and pieces, what really helped me to open my eyes was the reality that actually there's no point in being depressed, sad, or specifically angry at the press, because it's not going to change anything. It's certainly not what my mum wanted.
So you were saying you don't read about yourself at all?
Now I do when I need to.
How do you know when you need to?
Because there are people in my team who come to me with certain things and say, would you like us to deal with this, would you not? But I would say 97, 98% of the utter nonsense that is written, I either don't know about or I just have to ignore because there's actually nothing that one can do about it.
So you do not have a Google alert on your name?
I don't. You should never Google yourself.
Are you on social media?
I'm not on social
media. Like a burner account or something?
No. Why, do you want to follow me? Is that what's going on?
I was just wanted to find out. As you just mentioned, the press has been this reoccurring issue in your life. And one of the things that I was struck by, and I want to talk about this suit that's about to take place, or the trial that's going to take place in the UK, because you've described the British press as lawbreakers, not just liars. And I'm curious if this is how you think about all of the press, if this is just the UK press, if this is the tabloid press, sort of how you think about this sort of construct. Because here we are at the New York Times, journalistic operation. We like to think that we're trying to get at the truth. And how you sort of make sense of folks you think that are not doing it right and then folks that maybe are.
Well, first of all, I wouldn't be here if I thought that you were one of them.
Well, thank you.
Just so we're absolutely clear. But we've still got about 20 minutes left, so at any point, if I either leave or fall on the floor in a fetal position, you'll know why. It's quite a bizarre upbringing to have what is known as a royal rota, covering your every move. People that were given special access to your work that would also write complete nonsense about you during the rest of your life, and having to basically dance for them quite literally on engagements and work. So when I talk about lawbreakers, it's very, very specific to a group of British newspapers rather than any form of broadcast media. And that was then. What I see more on a larger scale across mainstream media, or what I think people have seen more lately, not even seen, what they perhaps feel, is perhaps a hidden agenda in some mainstream media, and also social media. It's almost like a competition who can sort of hide the truth or lie or mislead us more. But I think that one of the reasons why I brought the claim, and I can't talk much about it because, as you say, it starts in less than a month, is specifically for truth and accountability. And what I've worried about for most of my life, actually I didn't worry about it that much because I wasn't aware of it, but when I became aware of it, what I really, really don't like and what I find hard to make peace with is that there are some people on one end of the spectrum who are sitting behind their keyboards writing dangerous or defamatory headlines, knowing that it's going to work as clickbait because any context in the rest of the article protects them and there's nothing you can do about it. And at the other end of the spectrum, you have Nobel Prize winners like Maria Ressa, who is literally putting her life on the line, and war correspondents who, again, are putting their lives on the line to bring us the truth. So that, to me, is the spectrum. And my life has been covered by this end of the spectrum, which I will be damned if those journalists are going to ruin journalism for everybody else because we depend on it so much.
Without getting too far into the details of the trial, because I know it is coming, and I don't know what you cannot say. You did say in your book, you said, I began to think at some point that Murdoch was evil. You've had very strong words about Rupert Murdoch and what you think he did in this phone hacking scandal. What is the goal of this lawsuit, which has been ongoing now for a very, very long time?
The goal is accountability. It's really that simple.
But what does that mean?
That means that, unfortunately, the scale of the cover-up is so large that people need to see it for themselves. And the legal system within the UK is very different to I don't know how different it is to here, but there is a system which is set up where if you are offered more money as a settlement than you would ever get in court, then you're forced to have to settle. So there's no justice for any of these claimants, of which now stands at about 1,300 claimants.
Well, that's what I was going to ask you. I was going to say 1,300 people, from what I've read, have settled with the Murdoch folks. And of the 40 claimants that originally joined with you in this action, it's down to now 2. Yeah. There are some reports that suggest that even if you win in court, the amount that would be awarded to you would be less than what you could have gotten by settling.
I mean, 100 times over.
100 times over.
Even if or when we win, I'm still liable for the legal costs of both sides.
And so you think that everybody's just settled because it just doesn't make any economic sense to continue?
No, I know why people have settled. They've settled because they've had to settle. So therefore, one of the main reasons for seeing this through is accountability, because I'm the last person that can actually achieve that, and also closure for these 1,300 people and families.
In terms of that accountability, just so I understand it.
Do you remember when I said I couldn't talk about it?
Yeah. Let me ask you a related but different question, which is how much of that is an old fight versus what I imagine is a new fight in terms of this is all moved now to social media? Meaning it's all now, not just classic social media, but probably the dark web, if you will.
Yeah, no, I do. This claim, the hacking stuff is almost 15 years old. The cover-up of the hacking and everything else in between is actually relatively new. And I think that will be the piece that really shocks the world. But I scratch my head thinking, wow, is this already a moment that has passed? And that's certainly what they would like to believe, right. I think, right? They would say, oh, this is historical. Well, I've had to wait 5 years, 5 years for my claim. And in those 5 years, the retaliation and the intimidation for me as a witness has been quite extraordinary, especially with the attacks towards my wife and children. So yeah, I do think to myself, has this passed? And there will be a point when it's like, who's next?
And who is next? I mean, when you see what's happening now with a whole level of different type of misinformation, who is next? And how do you think we should reconstruct things? If the lesson that you're learning through this sort of tabloid or classic media in the UK was an example that you lived through, how do you connect that to where we are going?
Well, I think our need for credible information is so important, more important now than probably ever. And I think the experience that I had as a kid growing up, and again with all these other claimants, specifically with the tabloids, because I guess a lot of people in this room may think, well, they're tabloids. Of course they're going to behave like this. Of course they're going to say, and make up complete nonsense. But our print media is very different than it is over here, because the majority, if not all of our, almost all of our newspapers are tabloid related. But the biggest problem within the UK is that what might seem trivial or small or just a blatant lie in a newspaper then gets carried over onto news channels, radio channels, and breakfast shows. Right. And so it amplifies everything. So you're talking about social media amplifies all of that stuff as well. So even though the Sun newspaper has now less than 1 million readers, it doesn't take much to amplify a story that you probably should or could perhaps push to the side or ignore. So
your wife, Meghan, came here and we spoke in 2021. And one of the things that she said was...
Did you have this copy?
I don't know if we had this carpet. This is good carpet.
Things.
I think we've upgraded. We might have upgraded on the carpet.
That's good.
But one of the things that she said was she thought there should be a cigarette warning on social media then. And then since then, the Surgeon General has effectively come out and said the same thing. Do you think there should be some kind of shift in terms of how we deal with social media writ large?
Well, I think we've quite a few people, including the Surgeon General, have called it a public safety issue, public health issue. And I guess, are we allowed crowd participation?
Yeah.
Can I ask a question to those of you, bearing in mind I'm in a room here full of leaders of which I respect and admire. How many people in this room, by a show of hands, think that it is bizarre that this industry, the social media industry, is able to have pretty much zero accountability and transparency, and yet are able to make billions upon billions, over $1 billion a week, I believe, without someone, somewhere, or a group of people being able to actually change that? That was a sort of a long-winded answer, but by a show of hands, you yourselves are industry leaders, and yet here we are talking about an industry that is making billions off of all of us, and yet there's no transparency and no accountability. So by raise of hands, who thinks that they should be held accountable and there should be transparency for the social media industry? That's wonderful. Phew.
Almost everybody.
Almost
so here's the thing, clearly very popular, and yet it doesn't happen.
It doesn't happen, and one needs to question why. I'm not here to give, I'm an immigrant. I am by no means here telling anyone what they should do, but it does seem very, very odd, especially when we know what happens when a small group of people make billions for themselves or for their shareholders without any accountability. The Flint water crisis, the financial crisis. In fact, you wrote a book about it, and then you turned it into a movie. Did you not?
Yes.
Precisely. So we already know what's going to happen. We're actually in it. It's happening.
Right.
And I try to look at these things through the lens of a dad. Mm-hmm. And that's one of the reasons why we're so focused on the Parents Network through our foundation and being able to hear parents, American parents, Canadian parents, British parents, and larger, more across the globe as well. Because no one's asking for or looking for a ban. But what they do want is safety at the heart of it, safety at the heart of design.
Right. Let me ask you this, though. I don't know if you saw in Australia, they passed a ban for children under 16, social media, across the board. That makes sense to you?
As I just said, I don't think it necessarily makes sense, but I'm not going to sit here and tell Australia, unlike some people who own these platforms, telling other countries what they should or shouldn't do. But from the experiences that I've had and the conversations that we have had, myself, my wife, and our foundation through insight sessions around the world, kids, it's already been intentionally created to be addictive. So by banning it and removing it creates all sorts of problems, just as much as any advice to parents to say, well, just don't let them on social media. Do you know what happens when that happens? There's a massive falling out between the parents and the child. Or then the child goes to school, and guess what happens? They're probably the only person, or maybe 1 of 5% in the class that isn't on social media, and they get bullied.
Okay, I'm going to make it a little more complicated, because I actually think this is
more complicated?
It's become complicated by the following. There was an effort, you could argue, and maybe this is somewhat political, but there was an effort by some of the social media companies to, quote unquote, censor or maybe protect us, the public, from certain types of information during COVID and other things like that, where there was information that we were not seeing. It was downranked in the algorithm, you remember? And Sundar Pichai is going to be here, and there was lots of commotion about what people were able to see and what they couldn't see. And in some ways, that became a central tenet, in an odd way, of what's happened here in this even last election cycle in the U.S., where people said, oh, no, actually, that wasn't misinformation. What we thought was misinformation was actually real information, and we should have been able to see all of it. And we shouldn't be telling these folks what they can do or what they can't do. Even Mark Zuckerberg came out and publicly apologized for some of the sort of down rankings and algorithmic things that they were doing. And so I just wonder, because right now we're in this very unique moment where people are screaming from the rooftops that they want even more transparency. They actually don't. It's not they want us to be shielded from things. They say, give us everything and we'll sort it out ourselves.
Well, I think transparency, asking transparency or demanding transparency for the companies is very different to just let us see everything online. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, well, I think that's the big question about the transparency, which is, should we all be able to just get at everything? And it's on us as citizens to kind of figure out what's real and what's not. And, you know, if people want to lie, if people want to make stuff up. And I think that's a little bit what people, I mean, I don't want to suggest that this is where the country has moved, but I feel like there is a growing movement, at least more towards that, that's almost a backlash to any effort to say, actually, you know what, this stuff should be policed, even though I think everyone in this room just agreed that these companies should be held liable. At the same time, there's other people, and maybe they're outside of this room or other places. Maybe if we re-ask the question, they'd say, no, give me everything. Just feels like something's happening in this country around that. Yeah. Maybe even around the world too.
Yeah, each country is different, right? It's not a coincidence that the world has become more volatile, more divided since social media has been around for 20 years. I think hopefully we can all agree on that. So I think there's certainly a culture, an atmosphere of intimidation right now. That's certainly what I feel. And I don't believe that everybody is saying, just give us everything. I believe that the majority of people want to know that that the information isn't being censored, but that safeguards are absolutely necessary. And I believe that, you know, protecting speech and safeguards come hand in hand. And any argument to say that they don't, I think is, you know, this idea that someone's taking away, you know, free speech, that to me is a complete distraction.
When you talk to, and I'm sure you have, sometimes the leaders of these either social media companies or media companies, what is the reaction they give you?
Well, first of all, most of them we haven't sat down and spoken with most of them. I would love to. But I would also, you know, until we can find a proper solution here, or a long-term solution that I can't say everyone's going to be happy with, because clearly not everyone's going to be happy with. But I would welcome the chance to sit down, not necessarily with the you know, the CEOs, but more the shareholders, because the shareholders are the ones that really are in control. And I'm sure their parents, and I'm sure hopefully they would agree that kids need to be kept safe. But again, one of the things that's I guess has always puzzled me is that we live in an age now, or we have done, and this goes back to the tabloid era, specifically with the conversation that we were having about tabloids that you guys all heard, that we have elements of the mainstream media, legacy media elements, not all, elements, trying to redefine public interest for their own personal interest. And at the same time, we have social media companies trying to redefine free speech for their own personal interests. And what shocks me, or what fascinates me, is the fact that that's not a conflict of interest. Because it's so clearly, you know, the loudest voices are the people who are really deeply bought into making sure that things move the way that they want them to move. And the cost is, well, they make hundreds of millions.
That's very interesting. So I'm a professional journalist, and I'm a big fan of the First Amendment, right? The First Amendment goes much farther, for example, than the rules in the UK in terms of protecting people, right? What do you think? I mean, you live here now. What do you think of the First Amendment?
There's no way I'm going to talk about that. What I will say to that is, actually, I'll plug her book, Dr. Marianne Franks. Do you know what I mean?
I don't.
So Dr. Marianne Franks has just written a book called Fearless Speech, Chapter 4. I highly recommend it for you. You guys are more than welcome to read it as well. But I'm in the process of reading that at the moment, and I think it really encapsulates and explains the current situation with regard to free speech. and how, in chapter 4, specifically, how social media has done a very good job in defining reckless speech.
Defining reckless speech. And what is that definition?
Read the book. Read the book, man.
How much do you blame what we'll call reckless speech for the direction of your existence, your life? When you look back on all the things that have happened to you, and not just happened to you, but decisions you've made, how much does the media and all of this play into that? Do you think?
Yeah, no, of course, a lot. Without question, you know, we were running from something, quite a few things actually, but just jumping back a little bit, the speech point, in my understanding, is to allow and encourage people to participate. Speech in democracies, to allow people to participate in the democracy.
Right.
But the moment that you start normalizing hate speech,
Right.
aren't you taking away free speech from so many other people?
It's very complicated.
It's complicated,
Yeah.
and which is why, again, one of the reasons why I applaud you for doing these kind of things, not by inviting me, whatever, but being able to do these things, because again, on social media, every conversation and every complicated topic
Right.
is squashed into a box, limited characters.
Right.
And the moment you strip away context from anything, it just becomes a shouting match. You said that a minute ago, a shouting match. Whereas here in these conversations, there is actually added context. I don't know whether people agree or disagree, but at least there's context. It's conversation. We as human beings, that's what we're designed to do. What I'm going to suggest to you is, rather than doing this once a year, you should probably do that every day.
We've got a newspaper for that.
Yes, but that is still back to the same point,
Right.
which is some people don't trust what they read. Some people question it. I wish sometimes more people would question what they read. You know, with that critical thinking piece for all of us is such a critical element to us being able to survive. And I would, you know, for me, what is most important from this moment looking forward is that we don't become disinterested. We have to remain interested, because the moment we become disinterested, that's when we no longer get a vote.
Here's a complicated one that I was thinking about, that I imagine you must wrestle with, which is, it's very important, I would imagine, for there to be attention around you, in that people need to be interested in what you're doing, because you have lots of interesting and important and fundamentally fabulous causes that you're trying to pursue. But at the same time, I assume you don't want the attention. And I'm curious how you wrestle with that idea. I mean, I was looking even as we were in the race coming up to this day, I Googled news you, and there were people who are fascinated by everything you're doing all the time. They're fascinated by Megyn is in California right now, and you're here, and there's articles left and right about, you know, why are you doing independent events? Why are you doing them together?
Because you invited me, you should have known.
This is true.
You should have known that was going to happen.
But do you know, like, is that normal for you? That the second there's an article that says she's in California, you're in New York, they say, well, what is happening with these two, right? So is that a good thing for you in a way that there's so much interest in you?
No, there's definitely not a good thing. Because apparently we've bought or moved house maybe 10, 12 times. We've apparently divorced maybe 10, 12 times as well. So everyone's just like, what? So yeah, it's hard to keep up with, but that's why you just sort of ignore it. The people I feel most sorry about are the trolls, who their hopes are just built and built and built, and it's like yes, and then it doesn't happen. Right. So I feel sorry for them. Genuinely, I do. I mean that. But yes, I have no doubt that everything that we've spoken about today, in the last, the clock's on zero, 25 minutes, will be spun or twisted somehow against me, and maybe you yourself,
it's possible,
will be trolled relentlessly, and for that I can only apologise. But you did invite me, so it's not.
Well, I know we're almost out of time, but let me just ask you two other related things, which is you have a case in the UK so that you can go back there and hopefully have better security when you're there, and wanted to understand sort of where that whole thing stands, and also just whether you plan to remain here with us in the US.
I do. I very much enjoy living here and bringing my kids up here. It's a part of my life that I never thought I was going to live, and I feel as though it's the life that my mum wanted for me. And to be able to do the things that I am able to do with my kids that I undoubtedly wouldn't be able to do in the UK is huge, and that's a fantastic opportunity. I'm hugely grateful for that. You bring up another case, one that I can't talk about, and you should know that. But what I would say in that is, she's talking about security. I never should have had security removed in the first place. It's amazing when you go through this litigation, of which I have become a professional at, of which I aim to retire fairly soon. In that regard, I certainly don't want to be starting. I'm not starting them, right? I'm just trying to, again, find truth and accountability and ultimately reconciliation. But I never should have it removed. But the disclosure, I think you guys call it discovery process, has been troubling and enlightening. And I just have to now sit and wait until April.
If we have this conversation 30 years from now, what do you want to be known for?
And how many years?
30.
Why 30?
Can you do maybe 5, 10? What would you like to? I'm saying.
What are we known for?
Yeah, when this is all said and done, what is Prince Harry going to be known for?
I don't want to put my finger on anything specific. I think I know what you're trying to get at. There's some sort of he's going to take on the media.
No. I'm not trying to go anywhere. I say it was a completely just open question for me. I genuinely was curious, and I'm very curious when you look at your life and everything that's happened to your life and everything that you've gone through and everything you want to accomplish from here, what that feels like, what that looks like to you.
I think the world is moving so fast, it would be naive of me to put my finger on anything specific, but the main goal for me at the moment is being the best husband and the best dad that I can be. One of the reasons why I am not so much stuck in litigation, but the reason why these things have happened and any of the other moves and everything else, and what I believe to be fair and justified criticism towards institutions, perhaps government, media, and alike, is because of my 10 years military and the values and principles that I live by. And it's not something that I want to ever shrug off. It is becoming increasingly hard for I think for people who are valued. Not value, but have values and certain principles to stick to those as the world starts to, whatever you want to call it, change. But that to me is the thing that means the most to me, and the thing I want to be known for is that no matter what was happening around me, that he stuck to his values, and he always stayed true to that.
Prince Harry, everybody, thank you for a fabulous conversation. Thank you so very, very much.
Disclaimer: everything in this video and all of my videos are my opinions based on detailed research that I perform. That said, I would recommend doing your own research before you make up your mind. Thank you.
Stop.
Check out one of our newest videos right here. Plus, even more LMT videos about your favorite stuff are coming soon. Subscribe to our YouTube channel and hit the bell so you don't miss a single one.